Hello, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing another Boson NetSim lab. We're back in the security section, and today we're going to be doing AAA, login authentication and exec authorization. So of course, AAA stands for the authentication, the authorization, and then the accounting. I did a security lab before this one that involved AAA authentication. Didn't do so good on it. That was the video before this one. But I always like new challenges, especially in the security section, because you really go in depth in the CLI of these devices when you start doing authentication and authorization and things of that nature. So I love doing these types of labs and learning new things. So let's go ahead and get into this lab. I believe we're going to do better on this one. I'm going to say that at the beginning of this video, but let's go ahead and get into it. So the objective for this lab is to configure the router named regional, which is right here, to work with the local database and enable a password and line authentication in order to provide authentication, authorization, and accounting to AAA services. And the first task in this lab, you will use a AAA to authenticate against the local database for the enable, line, and local methods. In the second task, you will configure exec authorization against the local user database. In the third task, you will configure the HQ router to authenticate against the Cisco Secure Access Control System ACS server, which is down here. So this is our topology. We have the HQ router. We have the original router. They're connected via serial interface. It looks like we have a workstation and also our ACS server down here, and they're connected to these routers via a fast Ethernet cable. So I've already went through all of the commands that we're going to be configuring today and also read the descriptions. So we're going to keep the regular model as we usually do. We're going to have our lab up here at the top left. We're going to do all of our instructions top right, and we're going to be doing our CLI commands down here at the bottom. So let's go to pull up regional, because I think that's the router we're going to be doing all our configurations on. So it says configure the local database authentication by using AAA. So it says unless otherwise instructed to perform the following tasks on regional. Yep. So it says turn on AAA services. So first let's go enable, go to privilege exec, conf t, global config, and let's do AAA new model. New model. Perfect. All right, that's the first step. It says in the local database, create a user with the username regional user and a password regional pass. So let's go here. Let's create a username named regional user and a password regional pass. And that's going to work. So now let's set the enable password to training. So let's do enable password and let's set it to training. All right, I believe that's, nope, accidentally hit a slash. There we go. All right, so our enable password is training. Now it says configure login authentication to use the enable password as the default method. So let's do a login. No, do we do a login? It says configure login authentication to use the enable password as the default. So let's do authentication, maybe? No. So let's do AAA. There we go, authentication. I know I was missing something. Authentication, and we want to do enable, but we want to do login, and we want to do default. And we want to use the enable password as our default method. Perfect. So it says log out of the router. So let's do an end. Let's do an exit. And let's try to log back in now. And it's asking me for a password. So I'm going to type in training. Yep, and it let me in, because that's the enable password that we just created. Let's do enable, and let's do training again. And now we're back in. So we can do conf t to go back into global configuration mode, and we're back where we started. So we completed all the steps there. It says access the router through the console port. Which password should you use here and why? Well, we just use the training password because that's what we just configured up here in step 3. So that's why we use that. It says create a login authentication method named local auth and set it to authenticate users against the local database. So let's do a login authentication method named local auth. So let's do AAA authentication, and let's do a login, because that's what we want to do. And we want to name this local underscore auth, and it says set it to authenticate against the local database. So we're going to do local, and that's what we want. We want it to authenticate against the local database. So now it says apply local auth to the VTY lines. So let's go line VTY 0 through 4, enter. Now we're in VTY line configuration mode. And let's get some context sensitive help. And what do we want to do? It says apply this to the VTY line. So let's see where we're at, Let's do login authentication. And we want to use the local underscore auth right there. And perfect. So it says from workstation, telnet to regional, which is the 10.1.1.2. How did regional authenticate when you use telnet to connect? So we're going to use telnet. It's not secure, but this lab is telling us to use telnet instead of SSH. So let's telnet to the regional, which is 10.1.1.2. And it's asking me for a username. So I'm going to give regional user here. And let's give a password of regional pass. And we're in. And we're going to give a password right here of training. And now we're in privilege exec. Let's give a conft. And from here, we're telnetted into our regional router now. So we can do, really, let's give context sensitive help. We can do anything we want. So perfect. Now it says disconnect the telnet session. So let's do a end, an exit, and we're out of there. So perfect. That is task 1. Task 2, it says configure AAA exec authorization by using the local user database. So it says in the local database on regional, create a username with the username regional admin and a password of admin pass, and assign privilege level 15 to this user. So let's go back to regional. Let's get out of VTY configuration mode. Let's do a username of regional admin. Let's do a privilege of 15. And let's do a password of admin pass. Context sensitive. Perfect. All right. Now it says telnet from workstation to regional and authenticate as user regional admin. So let's go back to our workstation. Let's just click the up arrow so we can telnet back. And then we're going to use the regional admin credentials here. And then we're going to do admin pass here. And it says, what privilege level have you been placed at and why? So we're in regular user configuration mode. We're not even in privilege exec mode. And that is because, well, I'm not sure why, because over here we configured the privilege of 15. So I'm not sure why we're in user exec mode. But let's figure it out. So it says disconnect the telnet session. So let's go ahead and exit. Okay. So let's just read why. It says you have been placed at privilege level 1, which is user exec mode, which we see, although you have authenticated as regional admin. AAA is not configured to check the authorization level on the VTY lines. User exec is denoted by the following prompt. So we didn't specify the authorization level on the VTY line, so that's why we were placed into user exec mode. That makes sense. So we're probably about to do the authorization now in the next step. So it says on regional, create an authorization method named local auth. Configure authorization to be performed against the local router's database. So let's go back on regional and let's do an AAA authorization. And we want exec here. And we want to name it local local underscore auth. And it says configure it to be performed against the local router. So let's do local here. And perfect. Enter. So now it says on regional, apply local auth as the authorization line as the authorization method for the VTY lines. So let's go into line VTY 0 through 5. And let's do a context sensitive help. Let's do authorization. Let's do exec. And we want local underscore auth here. Perfect. Now it says telnet from workstation to regional and authenticate as user regional admin. So this time, I believe since we did the authorization to the VTY lines, we should be placed in privilege exec mode because we had the privilege level be level 15, which is the highest. So let's do regional admin. All right. And let's do admin pass. Yep. And we're placed straight into privilege exec mode, and we just do a conf t, and we're in global config now. So that's perfect. Now disconnect the telnet session. So let's do an in and exit. Perfect. So task 2 is now done. So it's task 3. Configure the router to authenticate to the ACS database. So it says in this task, you will configure the HQ router to authenticate against the ACS database. ACS server has been pre-configured with the credentials listed in the table below. So these are our credentials of our TechX server, our TechX key, our ACS username, our ACS password, and our ACS user specify enable password. So we have all of our credentials here, so we're going to keep that in mind. So it says log into HQ as user, HQ admin, and the password of HQ pass. So let's go to HQ here. Let's give the credentials of HQ admin, and let's give a password of HQ pass. All right, so we're in. On HQ, configure ACS server's IP address so the router can communicate and authenticate with the server. TechX Plus communication should be authenticated by using the key Boson and the IP address of 192.168.2.254. So let's do an enable. Let's do a conf t. And let's do a TechX server. Let's give a host of 192.168.2.254. Let's give a TechX server key of Boson. Okay. So I think that is what it wants here. Configure ACS server IP address so the router can communicate and authenticate with the server. So yep, we did the key that it's asking for. We configured the IP address. And it says create a login authentication method named AAA login and configure it to authenticate against ACS server. You should configure the local user database to be the backup authentication method. So first we're going to create a login authentication. So let's do AAA login. Oh, okay. Let me do AAA authentication first. Getting too ahead of myself. Authentication. Login. And we want to name it AAA underscore login. And it says you should configure it against the ACS server first. So we want to do group first. TechX Plus. And then next we're going to do local to do the local database last. So as the backup. So now we're going to create an exec authorization method named AAA exec and configure it to authorize exec sessions against ACS server. You should configure the local user database to be the backup authorization method. So let's do an AAA authorization. And we want this to be, let's give context sensitive, exec, okay? We want to AAA underscore exec. And first we want to authenticate against the TechX Plus server. And then we want to do the local as the backup. So enter. Now it says apply the AAA login and AAA exec methods to the VTY lines. So let's go to line VTY 0 through 5. And let's do context sensitive, just to give me a reference. And let's do login authorization. And we want AAA underscore login here. Perfect. And then we want to do authorization here, exec. And we want AAA underscore exec here. Perfect. So it says configure enable authentication to use the ACS server for primary authentication and use the local enable password as backup. So let me do, okay, what is it asking me? Configure enable authentication to use ACS server for primary authentication and use the local enable password as backup. So let's do AAA authentication. Okay, let me exit AAA authentication, context sensitive help. It says the ACS server as the primary authentication. Use the ACS server for primary authentication and use the local database. So maybe let me just do authentication here and see what it says. So no, I can't do that command. So let me do AAA authentication. This one has me a little stuck. I got to think about it. Okay. So let's do, okay. This one has me stumped. Configure enable authentication to use ACS server for primary authentication and use the local enable password as backup. So I guess that would be login. I'm gonna put login here. And no, so that's not right. Let me get some help here. I'm on task 3, task number 6. Okay, so we use enable here. So it says on HQ, you should issue the command to enable authentication to use the ACS server first and use the local enable password as backup. So we're going to do authentication enable default. So I was on the right track. And then group TechX plus enable. Okay. Okay. So that makes sense. So let's do AAA authentication. Told you every time I do one of these labs, especially in the security, I always learn something new. It's always good to lab. So let's do enable default, because we want to do the default authentication list. And then it wants me to do group. We want to try to do it against the TechX Plus server first. And then we're going to do, it says TechX Plus, and then use the enable password as backup. Perfect. So it says from workstation telnet to HQ. So let's telnet to 192.168.1.1. And we want to give the, so it says log in using the credentials listed in the table at the beginning of the task. So let's do a username of Cisco and a password of Cisco pass. And then let's do an enable. Oh, we're already in. Okay, so it placed me into privileged exec mode when I use the Cisco and the Cisco pass credentials. So it says, what credentials did you use to log into HQ and why? So I used the credentials that it told me to use right here. And then it says, what credentials would you use if ACS server failed? So if the ACS server failed, I would use the enable password that we configured over here. Because that's going to be the backup. If the ACS server is down, then we're going to use the ACS. We're going to use the local database that, it says right here. We configured it. It says local enable password as backup. So that's what we will use. So it says from the workstation, enter privileged exec mode on HQ. Which password did you use to enter privileged exec mode and why? Well, it placed me in privilege exec mode. I'm not sure if it was supposed to or not. So I'm not sure what this question is asking me because I didn't have to put in a password. So maybe that's a typo. Question number 10 says disconnect the telnet session. Can multiple enabled passwords exist on a router? That's a good question. I would say yes. I'm gonna say yes, but I'm not sure the reason why. So let's go down and figure out why. So it says yes, multiple enabled passwords can exist on the router, but it didn't tell me why. So not sure about that. It says log back into the HQ router. You should issue the following commands. So let's go back out into, let's go back up, I should say. And it says, let's do question number 13. It says log back into the HQ router. So let's log out, exit, telnet one more time. And I guess it just wants me to do HQ admin here. I think that's the credentials that it wants me to do. HQ admin and HQ pass. And if I do enable, well, I'm already in, again, privilege exec mode. So I think we did everything correctly in this lab. Let's hit the grade and see what we did. Okay, so we got 2 things wrong. So let's figure out what we did wrong. Oh, okay. So I did the configurations on the wrong VTY lines. I did line 0 through 4, but it's supposed to be 0 through 5. That was a typo. And I probably did the same thing over here. Yep. The same thing. So instead of doing the line VTY 0 through 5, I did it on 0 through 4. So let's see if we can resume the lab right quick and fix that. Okay. I think it was on regional and HQ, yes. So let me go to HQ and let's do a line VTY. I put VTY 0 through 5. And then let's do that on regional as well. Let's do an exit. Let's do a line VTY 0 through 5. So I think I have to do the actual configurations in those as well. So I need to do login, authentication, AAA, login exec, and authorization. Okay. And I think I need to do the same thing over here. So on HQ, I need to do AAA login and AAA exec. Okay, so let's do that one first. AAA login and AAA exec. So let's do AAA. Let's do login, authentication, AAA underscore login. Let's do authorization, exec, AAA, auth. Believe that's correct. So let's grade now and see what happens. Okay, so we still got it wrong. So what am I doing wrong? So I may have to restart this whole lab in general. I know exactly what I had wrong. I just configured the VTY lines wrong. So I would have to go in and actually reconfigure the whole VTY configuration. So I had to put no VTY 0 through 4 just to get this off of the router. And then I would have to do line VTY 0 through 5. And then just put the right stuff that's supposed to be in there. So I know what I did wrong. I need to go ahead and, let me go ahead and correct it while I'm here. Let me do no, let me go exit, no line VTY 0 through 4. Okay, exit. Let's do line VTY 0 through 5. And let's do what we did again. So let's do a in context sensitive help. Let's do login, authentication. I could have sworn I just did this. AAA underscore login. And let's do an authorization of exec, AAA off. Okay. No, so that's not right. Let me go back. What are we on? HQ? We're on HQ. Okay, so I did it wrong. It's AAA Exec. That's what we want. So it's still wrong. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to redo this whole lab. I know what I did wrong. So we're going to upload this video. I want to be honest about, when I get configurations wrong and things of that nature and learn from it. So I'm going to go ahead and upload this one, I should say. But I know what I got wrong. I'm just going to redo the whole entire lab, start with a clean config, and then go from there. So I appreciate you guys watching this one. Like I said, in the security section, I always, sometimes I trip up and I learn a lot. And in this one, I definitely learned that, you have to go with the right VTY lines. You have to do 0 through 5 instead of 0 through 4. It's a typo on my part. But next time we'll get it. I appreciate you guys watching this one. Thank you. See you in the next one.